Welcome back. Today, in our second video, again, we're going to figure out how to actually write the factored answer for a difference of squares. Don't forget, we're in our last section of our factoring book. We already wrote down some stuff on the top and the bottom. We're going to continue those examples because we haven't actually found a final answer yet. At this point in time, we've just said, yes, it is, or no, it's not a difference of squares. So let's figure out how to find a final answer. So we already said a squared minus b squared is a difference of squares. I know the square root of both numbers, and it is being subtracted. The answer to a difference of squares, so remember like when we were doing Xbox and trinomials, or even just the box method, we always got like our two parentheses right next to each other. So we're going to get the same kind of answer for a difference of squares. We're going to get our two parentheses right next to each other. And in our parentheses, we're going to take the square root of each number. So the square root of a squared is a. And since the a squared came first, I wrote the a first in both parentheses. And then the square root of b squared is b. And since the b squared came last, I put that last in each parentheses. And then you'll notice within the parentheses that each parentheses has a different middle symbol. So one is adding and the other one is subtracting. Because the symbols are different, we can't write it as a parentheses squared. A parentheses squared would be like I multiplied something by itself. But the changing from an adding to a subtracting sign means that these are different parentheses and you do have to write them separately. That's it. Square root both numbers, one with a plus, one with a minus. And again, this is an example. We had already written down a squared minus b squared earlier today up here. So go ahead and write the answer underneath or to the side or wherever you have space for it. Here's the other example that we had done up here earlier today, 49 minus y squared. Now, the order does matter when you are writing your final answer. So if my number 49 comes first, the square root of 49 will need to come first in each of my parentheses. So I would go ahead and just like write your two parentheses. And then at the beginning of each parentheses, put a 7, because the square root of 49 is 7. And at the end of each parentheses, put a y. The square root of y squared is y. And you need one with a plus and one with a minus. And honestly, it doesn't matter which one comes first or second, as long as you have one of each. That's it, guys. Pretty simple. If you can identify if it's a difference of squares, then you can instantly write your answer. Now, in our first video, we had 10 try on our owns, and we identified 5 of them as difference of squares. So I want you now to go to those 5 that you said yes, and I want you to write the final answer. I want you to actually factor it. And I put them back on the screen for you. So numbers 1, 2, 4, 8, and 10 from the first video were yes, a difference of squares. And now that we know how to write an answer for that, go ahead and write an answer for these 5 problems. When you're done, unpause the video and we can check your work. Okay, let's see how you did. So for number 1, I got x plus 2 and x minus 2. And again, you could flip-flop that. You could put x minus 2 first and x plus 2 second, and that would be okay. What you can't flip-flop, you can't flip-flop the x and the 2. The x has to come first and the 2 has to come second. For number 2, I got 3x plus 1 and 3x minus 1. Notice that since the 9 and the x squared were right next to each other, the 3 and the x have to be right next to each other. And don't forget, the square root of 1 is 1. For number 4, we have to do a pre-step. We have to factor out a GCF first. Now, we had already done that in the first video, so maybe you had already written that down. But we do need to do one step of factoring before we factor it as a difference of squares. So take out your GCF of 2. That number 2 will still be part of your answer. It still goes in the front. And then x squared minus 4, we had already done that one up here. It turns into an x plus 2 and an x minus 2. Since there were 2 types of factoring, we end up with 3 parts to our answer, the GCF and our 2 parentheses. On number 8, don't forget in the first video, we said to flip-flop the order so that the minus sign is in the middle. That'll always make sure that you get the right number in the front and at the end of each parentheses. So for this one, I got x plus 4 and x minus 4. Finally, number 10. We wrote down earlier that the square root of x to the fourth is x squared. So I get x squared plus 9 and x squared minus 9. But this is not the final answer. We can do more stuff with it. If we take a look at this second parentheses, x squared minus 9, that is also a difference of squares. Now, the first parentheses is not a difference of squares because it has an adding sign in it. So we cannot factor the first parentheses more, but it still is going to be part of your answer. So I still need to include the x squared plus 9 as part of my final answer. But the x squared minus 9, I'm going to factor that again. X squared minus 9 turns into x plus 3 and x minus 3. Again, since we had two different types of factoring, we're going to end up with 3 parts to our answer. Each time you factor, you add a new part. So we start with the one original problem. After we factor it the first time, we get 2 parts. If we factor it again, we would get 3 parts, right? So we start with the one original problem, then we have 2 parts, then we have 3 parts. The same thing happened up here. One original problem, 2 parts, 3 parts, okay? This concludes all of our types of factoring. Next week, we're going to focus on when to use which method and how to make sure that you are factoring completely as much as humanly possible. Until then.